Welcome to Grid Live Wrap Up. I'm Joe Santiago, and with me we got Kobe Lemeth from Grid Tonight. One race weekend, Formula One, the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Lots to talk about with this race, and of course, a big thank you to our Patreon investors, Colin, Michelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew for investing in Grid Network each and every month. Link in the video description that you could invest. Also, you could do YouTube, Super Chats, buy me a coffee. We'll thank you on the air, get your name on the leaderboard, and one of the big things, of course, social media at Grid Network TV and gridnetworktv.com for our latest articles throughout the world of motorsports. Kobe, I know it's a big weekend for a lot of folks taking a time off, so we didn't have IndyCar, we didn't have NASCAR, nobody except Formula One at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, and this race I think could be a defining moment for the 2025 season.
Yeah, definitely, Joe. And before I get started, I want to wish everyone a happy Easter out there to all those who celebrate and really appreciate anyone spending their Easter Sunday with us here at Grid Network to talk about the F1 race, one of the only races that was happening all throughout motorsports this weekend. And you're right, Joe. You said it was a defining moment. And the defining moment of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, lap one, turn one, like we usually say with some of these F1 races, if Max Verstappen did not get a great start despite starting on the pole, Oscar Piastri was on the inside lane and got side by side with the Red Bull. Verstappen claimed he was pushed wide, and Verstappen ended up getting a 5-second time penalty for gaining an advantage, which essentially ended up handing the win to Oscar Piastri in a trap position race. Piastri, after winning this race, he's now the new Drivers' Championship points leader after winning in Jeddah. Joe, it looks like Oscar Piastri has truly developed into a championship caliber driver. Now, he's so cool, calm, and collective. Seems like nothing phases him at all, and he has proven that he can perform under any circumstances, regardless of the pressure that's facing him. So, in your opinion, do you think he is becoming the true favorite for this year's championship?
Yes, he has, and like you say, he's so cool, calm, collective. After the Australian Grand Prix, where we saw the two McLarens go off because of the wet weather and the timing of the rain coming down, Oscar Piastri, of course, went in the grass, got stuck, was able to keep the car running. I thought this was going to be the moment where it's like, okay, Oscar Piastri is not at that level yet. It looks like it's still going to be Lando Norris, who went on to win the Australian Grand Prix. But then the next few races, Oscar Piastri just getting what he needs to do, getting 3 wins now. I mean, he has risen up to that level. And today, having a great start to force the issue with Max Verstappen going toe to toe. And I really thought we were going to see what we've seen in the past with Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, a collision. We did not see that. I think that was good heads up driving by Oscar Piastri, just putting enough pressure, knowing that he had a penalty coming for Verstappen. I just think he is now the man to beat. Lando Norris seems to be falling off the pace. We know the issues with Max Verstappen's car. Ferrari, well, we don't know where they are. I don't think Mercedes could get to that level. This is going to be Oscar Piastri's season. The big thing, you just keep doing what you're doing. Don't let the pressure get to you, because I don't think there's going to be any pressure from within McLaren.
Yeah, it really seems like that. Lando Norris is, kind of taking maybe a small step back, or you can even argue that he stayed exactly where he was, compared to the end of last season. But Oscar Piastri, he's the one who I believe has grown the most as a young driver. And today, like I said, Max Verstappen essentially handed to win to Oscar Piastri right there, turn one, lap one. And I wonder if Max Verstappen is beating himself up, because if he, just given the place back, after that, you wouldn't have got the time, you wouldn't have got the 5-second time penalty, and maybe you would have, you would have been within range to pass Piastri on merit there, despite and not get the time penalty. So maybe if Max Verstappen had to do what happened in lap one, turn one all over again, he might consider giving the place to Piastri and then just chasing him down, because he would have definitely been in DRS range, and Max definitely had the pace in that difficult to drive car and could have potentially gotten up there and challenged Piastri for the win. As I said, it was a track position race, and Piastri, had that clean air, and there was just no coming back from that penalty that Max Verstappen had, because that really ended up being the difference in this all. But definitely don't want to take away from the great day that Oscar Piastri had. And it's just been really nice to see him come along and develop into this true championship caliber driver. And and it seems like he's going to be tough to beat throughout the remainder of the year. And Joe, you just mentioned Lando Norris. Of course, he was stuck with an uphill battle all race long, given a 10th place starting position on the grid. Norris crashed in Q3 on Saturday. The team got the car ready. He ended up being the fastest, yet, still missed out on a podium. But Norris still salvaged a 4th place finish, given how difficult, it is to pass around Jeddah once the cars get spread out, moving up from 10th to 4th, is a lot for him to be proud of in many respects. And if I had to vote for driver of the day, I probably would have chosen him for driver of the day. I have no idea why Max Verstappen was voted driver of the day, but that's a discussion for another day. But looking at Lando Norris, he has 1 win compared to Piastri's 3 and ended up losing the points lead. Joe, is Norris no longer in a position where he can ask for equal treatment from the team? I know we like to talk about those papaya rules.
Yes, when it comes to the papaya rules, this is something where I think Lando Norris could be now being asked, hey, we need you to do this for the better of the team and potentially compromise your race for Oscar Piastri. Piastri, 3 wins, championship point leader, just looking great. This is going to be really hard for Lando because throughout the race weekend, leading up to Q3, he was looking like the fastest one. I think he still has the pace in that car. Piastri is stepping it up against his teammate, and for Lando Norris, he needs to step up from making these errors, making these mistakes, especially when you've got Piastri up front. Whether he's on pole or the front row, he's going to be a winning contender. You cannot be in the third row. You cannot be in the back half of the top 10. You do not want to be outside of Q3. A mistake in qualifying at that level would be hugely detrimental to Lando Norris. And I think you're at the point now where if you have Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri in the top 2 rows, they're going to say, hey, we want to make sure Piastri gets that better start. What do we need to do? And then make sure, okay, Piastri is a priority, then Lando. Then maybe they could go race it out. But yeah, it's getting to that point where I feel like Lando, the last couple of weeks, he's sort of lost that competitive edge to Piastri.
Yeah, definitely, Joe. I agree with everything you said. Like I was saying, I think Oscar Piastri is on a different level right now, and Lando Norris, needs to try to catch up to where Piastri is at. I know that's easier said than done, though, because it's just a real strange situation with Lando Norris, because for the last season or so, we've been saying that Lando's the guy. Oscar, is still learning. Now it seems like they've completely flip-flop with Oscar Piastri, looking like he's going to be the priority moving forward, while Lando, he might just have to play second fiddles because, it seemed like the team has preferred Lando for the most part. And we saw earlier, just a couple of weeks ago, in Japan, when Oscar like, hey, I'm faster than Lando, let me see if I can go get Max. But, they stayed put, and it seemed like Oscar had the pace that he could have done something about Max, but in that case, Oscar just put his head down and did what's best for the team. Now, if Oscar Piastri goes on this run, and Max, and it's gonna be like him and Verstappen for the championship, and Lando, is gonna be like third or whatever. If there's a position, where Max is running third, Lando's leading and Oscar second, the team might just be like, I'm sorry, Oscar, I know you want to win this race, but for the better of the team and to extend Oscar's gap over Max, we need to, enact these papaya rules, and we need to have you finish second and let Oscar win the race. That's not something you want to see in Formula One, obviously, but from a business perspective, it's the best thing that the team can possibly do to try to, maximize the points so they can go out there and win the championship. So I think, the next race is the Miami Grand Prix. Lando Norris needs to go out there, and just show up and show out, just like he did last year. Remember, last year was the turning point for Lando Norris, the Miami Grand Prix, the site of his first career Formula One win after coming so close so many times in the past. So I think that if he can remember those beautiful moments from Miami last time around, that he can go out there, and show that he can take the fight to Oscar throughout the rest of the season. Because I know we see rivals on the track, between different F1 drivers, but there's no rivalry, more intense than the rivalry with your teammate, especially with 2 number 1 caliber drivers like Norris and Piastri. And we ended up getting our one and only safety car of the race on lap 1 when Yuki Tsunoda and Pierre Gasly crashed out. It looked like a racing incident, but of course, once again, the second Red Bull car fell to score points. And on the F1 broadcast, Crofty even said, that although, Yuki ended up retiring from the race, that this was the first time we had 2 Red Bulls starting in the top 8 since the Azerbaijan Grand Prix last year. So it's been a while since we've seen two Red Bull cars starting inside the top eight. So given how long that's been, that was, a win for Yuki Tsunoda, to make it to Q3 and to start in the top eight. It looked like it could be potentially be a decent points day for both Red Bull drivers, but unfortunately, it just wasn't meant to be in the driver standings unless there's a change in the results post race. Isaac Hadjar and Carlos Sainz, they're tied with Tsunoda in the points, but they're ahead of him due to the tiebreaker of having the best finish. And Liam Lawson, the other driver in that Red Bull kerfuffle, he's still pointless this season. But today, I have to say, after seeing him drive, today was probably one of his best races of the 2025 season so far, despite not finishing in the points. He just finished right outside the points. Joe, do you believe the mess has taken away from Red Bull's effort this weekend, especially for Verstappen, with Tsunoda going out on lap one?
I feel this has to be a huge distraction for Red Bull because you're entering the weekend and it's no longer just 100% go out there, Max get the win. You had, I mean, at this point last year in this race, you had the reliability of Sergio Perez then. Of course, that dropped off significantly. Overall, when it comes to what Red Bull is going through right now, with this mess, trying to make the car better, which the car alone is not that great. It's a challenge for even Verstappen, but Verstappen just showing his potential out there, going out there, getting the win, fighting for the win. He is just making it work. And then the second half of the garage, gee whiz, they're not getting the track time. Yuki Tsunoda crashing out again, not doing that well in the points. He just got in there. I don't think there's any sense of Yuki needs to be replaced. I hope not. He's way too early into this tenure in the car he did not prepare for this season. He prepared for that Racing Bull. And Isaac Hajar, what an effort on him to do everything he's doing. I think he knows it's best for him. Just finish this season with the Racing Bulls. Do not enter this picture, this discussion of who's going to be Max Verstappen's teammate the next race weekend. So overall, I do think it is having a negative impact on Red Bull. You're getting this negative attention. You're getting this distraction. The rumors now, especially of Verstappen not being happy, I can't blame him. Verstappen, he's doing everything he can. And then he looks in the other side of the garage and it's like, what's going on? We don't have that great of a car. You guys really pushed it. It'll be really interesting to see how it happens. But overall, I think that was a bit of an impact on the Red Bull, just everything going on and not being able to get Max exactly that perfect weekend. I mean, and you brought up about the lap one incident. I started thinking since we had that safety car, if that safety car didn't come out, could Verstappen have done what we saw during the race, let Piastri around, entering that final corner, and then get around him on that long straightaway? It would have been really interesting to see, but of course, that's all what ifs.
Yeah, definitely a lot of what ifs, and I have a feeling that this season might be the season of what if for Red Bull, because I know one of their main goals coming into this year's championship was to reclaim the constructors. And if we look at the constructor standings, it's not something you're going to smile at if you're a Red Bull fan, because McLaren, Piastri, Lando Norris, they continue to stack up those points in the constructors, and then Max Verstappen is basically just carrying the team in the constructor standings. And when you have two good drivers like McLaren having cars that both of them are capable of driving, obviously they're going to continue to add up the points on the constructor side of things. And then when you have Verstappen, who's basically the only Red Bull driver finishing in the points, and then the other Red Bull driver, regardless of who's in it, maybe they're finishing the points, but more than likely they're not going to finish in the points. So it's going to be extremely difficult for Red Bull to try to win the constructors this year. I have a feeling that the constructors might just be over for them this season, given how poorly that second team has run, and it might just be a McLaren runaway at the top. So Red Bull's best bet is probably going to be trying to get Max Verstappen, the World Drivers' Championship some way, somehow. And I will say, if Max ends up pulling off this championship this year, this will probably be the most impressive World Championship that he's won so far, because I know people like to joke about this current Red Bull car being so hard to drive. A lot of people call it a tractor. I even saw a meme on the internet yesterday of Max Verstappen riding in a Red Bull, right on a tractor with a Red Bull livery on it, given how difficult this car is to drive. And I still don't understand, why another driver cannot drive this car. It's amazing that Max can even drive this car, given how difficult it is. But I'm with you, Joe. I don't think that they should get rid of Yuki Tsunoda already, but who knows? Given Red Bull, they might make another driver's change, since Isaac Hadjar is running well at Racing Bulls right now. they might be like, hey, maybe we should give him a go and see if he can score points in the constructors. But then if you put Isaac Hadjar in there, he's probably going to be like, probably do just as well as Yuki Tsunoda or, like Liam Lawson, completely struggle with the car. So Red Bull has a lot of work to do throughout the rest of the season to get this car going better. Well, both cars going better, but yeah, I think they can be. I think Max, can be happy having a good point stand, all of that. But from the whole team's perspective, definitely have to feel disappointed because you really hope that Yuki Tsunoda can get you some points moving forward. And something else that might be a surprise from this racing weekend was Charles Leclerc finishing on the podium in third place. It was the first for Ferrari in the Grand Prix this season. They brought some upgrades to put them ahead of the Mercedes, which had double points, but they still felt like a disappointment. Is Ferrari making steps forward, or is this a result of the track and tire wear that compromised Mercedes' race?
That's what I was really curious about. Was this just more Mercedes? Their car, we know the high flowing nature of this track. I thought it was going to be something similar to what we saw at Suzuka, because after that first corner, you have those high speed S's. But it just seems like the Ferraris really stepped it up. So I'm thinking maybe they do have something better with that car. We saw them in the top 10. And then for Leclerc to make that strategy work of staying out much longer, taking care of those tires, then pitting and getting that third place, getting around George Russell, I'm thinking maybe Ferrari's back. But of course, this is just a very unique circuit with such high speed flowing corners. Now we're going to go to Miami. It's going to be a very different beast. Then you got the rest of the season. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in Miami. Will the Ferrari still have to pace against Mercedes? If that's the case, then I think Ferrari's here. But if we see again where George Russell's in the top three conversation again for qualifying, if Kimi Antonelli's ahead of both Ferraris, then I think that'll be more a sign that potentially this was more the race and just it wasn't going Mercedes' way.
Yeah, and it's weird at first because it seemed like that this race today in Saudi Arabia was going the way of Mercedes. Both George Russell, Kimi Antonelli started off really strong, but as the race went on, their tires got more wear on them. We started to see them slide back and fade later on in the race. So maybe this was So maybe Ferrari was able to capitalize on that. But like you were saying, Joe, Miami, we'll see if the upgrades truly help Ferrari, and especially Charles Leclerc, because right now I know some of the talking points heading into this weekend, was Lewis Hamilton, guys. Seemed like he's not quite on the pace compared to Charles Leclerc. We thought Lewis, was going to push Charles Leclerc, to be a better driver this year, but it seemed like, Charles Leclerc, is, continuing to carry Scuderia Ferrari right now as Lewis Hamilton continues to get up to grips with the car. I know a lot of media, had a lot to say about Lewis and Ferrari this weekend, wondering if this partnership is going to work because Charles Leclerc has been having the upper hand so far. And we saw today Leclerc also had the upper hand, so I'm sure Lewis was continue to get laps in the car and see what he can make out of this. And one last note on Verstappen, I forgot to mention. Speaking of the media, I'm not sure if you saw this, Joe, but Verstappen had a cheeky moment with the media earlier in the week. When they were asking him about the rumors about potentially going to Aston Martin, leaving Red Bull at the end of the year, and he said, I focus on driving, you focus on your commentary." So a lot of things been said right now in F1 media land. And throughout this race, we did see some passing, but it was very reliant on the DRS as the field got spread out. DRS games were used by Lewis Hamilton and Lando Norris, for while Williams used DRS to allow Alex Albon to stay ahead of Isaac Hadjar and coming out of a triple header of races with Japan, Bahrain, and now Saudi Arabia, where passing was difficult. Do you think this could be a trend for 2025, the year of track position, or would the time off before Miami allow the teams to figure out their cars more?
The time off is a welcome break for the F1 teams because we know besides all the work of traveling for 3 consecutive weekends, you also now have the opportunity to really focus in the factories of what do we need to do to make this car better. I think overall, one of the big things is races that we've seen sort of this DRS be the main instigator for the passes. It's indicating that the dirty air is making it hard. Now, of course, these cars, through the evolution of the current regulations, have gotten to the point where now the dirty air is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger problem. If we see the next race week in Miami, which of course is going to be very different, passing there we know is more challenging as well too. If we see some improvement, I think Miami might be a good spot, particularly as they're approaching that first straightaway, which again, you're going to have the system DRS. You have that long straightaway. DRS will be helpful as well too. If we don't see an improvement, then I think what's going to happen in Miami is really going to be a race where you start could be pretty much where you're running after that first lap, and then it's going to come down to this tire strategy. I think if we had some pretty long lasting tires, the hard tires, the medium tires, we didn't see that big of a tire drop off. I think if we had a little bit of the softer compounds, of course, then we could have seen a little bit more when it comes to the tire fall off. Because I was surprised not to see the tire fall off. I thought that was going to bring some more pass and more opportunities, but we just did not. And now overall, with everything coming out about the new car, potentially DRS, we don't know where that's going to go. I think we're just going to might be stuck in a situation where this might be the trend for 2025, but the outlook is we're putting in for a better racing product in 2026.
Yeah, but the thing is, Joe, every time we get a new regulations change, with a new car coming out, they always promote it in a way where they're like, we're building this car for better racing, and try to eliminate this dirty air. And look, every time we say that, what do we get? We get the exact same result, problems with dirty air. So I'm not really holding out any hopes for better racing in 2026, but we're focusing on 2025 right now. But given the racing we've seen so far this year, I think that it's probably going to be a trend, where track position is going to be important. So you want to make sure you're qualifying as further to the front as you can, so you can make sure that you maximize, what you can on race day. And to be fair, Formula One, the racing has always mostly been, a track position series where based on how you qualify is basically where you finish. I mean, it's not as bad as it used to be in many respects, because it used to be, lap one, turn one. If you're out ahead, that's the race, and that was really what it was every single racing weekend. I mean, we see that a lot now, but I had a feeling, back when I was growing up watching F1, that's how it was. Whereas if you had to lead lap one, turn one, you're probably already looking your race winner. You could turn off the TV and go do something else. But yeah, I hope we can see some exciting moments throughout the rest of the season, because so far in 2025, we haven't really seen many exciting moments in F1. But I think that probably the most exciting thing we saw this year, was the Australian Grand Prix in those mixed conditions, when it was going from wet to dry, back to wet. That was probably, most memorable race we've had so far, while the rest of the races, probably forgettable, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, the rest of the races, not exactly a shining moment for F1. Overall, it's going to be very interesting to see how everything shapes up. Let's check out how today's race shaped up. The grid ranking for week number 3 with only F1 running. Of course, no change on the top. Alex Palou still leads, but the big mover, Oscar Piastri, with his third win, moves from 10th to 7th. Meanwhile, Lando Norris has fallen out of the top 10. He is 17th. You take a look, of course, 17th for Verstappen still in 14th, Russell 22nd, and Leclerc 33rd. 5 Americans in the top 10. That is something we haven't seen in quite some time. Most again with 4 from NASCAR and Kyle Kirkwood from IndyCar. Now, Kobe, when it comes to the top 10, we have 3 people in there that have 3 wins. Christopher Bell from NASCAR. We have Marc Marquez from MotoGP and Oscar Piastri now from Formula One. Which person do you see earning win number 4 first?
I think that this is going to be an easy one for me, Joe. Right before coming on the air, I looked at the schedule for next week, see where they're racing at. It would be easy to pick Oscar Piastri, but I'm not going to do that, since F1 has an off weekend after this triple header. They'll be back the following weekend, for the Miami Grand Prix. So Piastri's out, and next week got MotoGP and NASCAR. MotoGP at Jerez in Spain, home race for Marc Marquez, the king of Spain. So I have to go with him, being the first one to win number 4, given the pace he's had on this Ducati bike so far this season, this factory Ducati bike, excuse me. Yeah, he's just been so amazing, and he seems to be almost a lot to win every single race this year. But, we've certainly seen slip-ups from him, but I look for him to be on the top step of the podium in Jerez. So I might have tipped off my early pickle winner for this MotoGP racing weekend. And I'm not going to say Christopher Bell, because NASCAR is at Talladega. Anything can happen at Talladega. Almost any driver can win there, given the circumstances. So it'll be really hard to predict Christopher Bell trying to win at Talladega.
Yeah, Talladega is a wild card, and really, Marc Marquez could have been a 4-time winner had he not crashed out while leading at Coda, unless we see something drastic occur, or Pecco Bagnaia somehow just delivers the performance of the weekend. I think you're looking at Mark Marquez getting the win. Oscar Piastri, of course, F1 off competition there, still tense. He could get a fourth win later in the season without a doubt. That leads up to this question from the chat room. Denver asks, could we see an Aussie F1 world champion? And if Yuki doesn't get into gear, will Red Bull be on a Red Bull unemployment line? I'll start off, Kobe. I think easily we could Piastri is the best bet for a F1 champion from Australia. He's just, as we talked about, cool, calm, collective. I think he's putting himself some distance between him and Lando Norris. Red Bull unemployment line for Yuki. Oh man, that is just so complicated. Your thoughts on both questions, Kobe?
I said, well, I think for starters, if I remember correctly from the Sky Sports F1 broadcast, I say Oscar Piastri was the first Australian to lead the F1 World Championship in the driver's stat, and since his current manager, Mark Webber, who was the #2 Red Bull driver for the longest time, alongside Sebastian Vettel, so it'd be really nice, if Oscar Piastri can hold on throughout the season and win this year's F1 World Championship. And as we said during our F1 segment, that he looking like the championship favorite, and I would not be surprised if he is a world champion at the end of the year, and that would be really awesome for all the people who from Australia who cheer on Oscar Piastri and all of the other Aussie drivers who've competed in F1 over the years. And in regards to Yuki Tsunoda, given the way Red Bull is, if he doesn't deliver it, at any point later on in the season, I would not be surprised if they try to throw Isaac Hadjar in there and see what he's got or anything like that, and send Yuki back to racing bulls. But I would not be surprised if if it don't go well, Yuki be out of Red Bull at the end of the year. Maybe he finds a spot over at Aston Martin. Given the relationship with Honda he has, that could be an option. And if Yuki doesn't find a spot in F1 next year, I would say I love to see him in the IndyCar series. I know last year, I think when F1 came over here for the Las Vegas Grand Prix, he went out. All of the Honda drivers basically went to like a special event out there, and they got to drive different cars. Now Max Verstappen got to drive the Acura GTP car, and then Yuki Tsunoda, he got to get in the IndyCar, Honda powered IndyCar from Ganassi, and Scott Dixon was coaching him, and Yuki did really well in the IndyCar. And plus, it's been several years since we had a full-time IndyCar driver from Japan, since Takuma Sato becoming Indy 500 only driver. I think if his F1 career comes to an end, I would love to see Yuki in IndyCar. And he even said that maybe someday at some point in his racing career he would like to race in the IndyCar series. I think he would be really popular with the IndyCar fans.
Yeah, anytime I feel you got a former F1 driver come to IndyCar, they seem to be really popular, big welcoming. I think he just has the personality that he could really bring a lot more fans as well too. Let's take a look at the rest of the grid ranking again. 34 spots out of 35 filled out. Sebastian Ogier from World Rally Championships not listed as he only has one start, and he is still in the World Rally Championship top 5 in their ratings. Of course, the top 5 of each series ratings make it onto the grid ranking. Supercar Series, Cam Waters, he is outside the top 10 despite having 3 wins, Kobe, which is a bit of a surprise, but we know they've had 10 scheduled races. 9 has occurred, 1 has been canceled, so that impacted everyone's score in supercars. But traditionally, we see 2 or 3 supercar drivers in the top 10, but we don't have any. Could this be a sign of a much more competitive supercar season?
Yeah, gone are the days you can pick Scott McLaughlin for every single race and win pick-a-winner points. Gone are the days you can pick Shane Van Gisbergen in the win all the supercar races to get your pick-a-winner points. But yeah, I think that this is an exciting thing for the supercar series. I know what a great ranking would like to reward, dominance and all of that. And typically when you have, driver from a certain series up towards the higher in the standing, it really shows how dominant they are and how good they are in the series. We can often, show like a lack of parity. And, given how further down the supercars drivers are down in the grid, I think that could, be a good thing for the series in general, where we can see a great mix of winners. I know that right now in the supercars, is really wide open who can win. Or traditionally, we've often gone with the Triple Eight drivers to win, or maybe a Cam Waters, but others are stepping up and getting the job done lately, which is really exciting for the series. It's definitely looking like it's going to be a competitive season in supercars, because you truly don't know who's going to win these races, these days.
Yeah, the races, especially after the last race weekend, hardly anybody scored any pick-a-winner points. It's going to be very interesting to see how the rest of the supercar series goes. And of course, you can follow the grid ranking across our social medias at Grid Network TV. Kobe, let's go ahead and wrap up the show with our one shining moment.
Yeah, thankfully, after last few weekends had marathon of shows, we're gonna finish up way early today. Thankfully, with only one racing series, and yeah, if you're watching here live or on replay, let us know down in the chat below what's your grid one shining moment from this racing weekend. This was the only race in the grid ranking this weekend. We also had NASCAR at Rockingham, the World Endurance Championship was running their 6-hour event in Imola. So you still have other races to choose from. And Joe, I'm going to start with you. What's your grid one shining moment this weekend?
My shining moment is going to go from the F1 race, and it's going to come from Williams' team. Williams double point finish, big performance of teamwork. Carlos Sainz giving that toe to Alex Albon to stay ahead of Isaac Hadjar. What great teamwork! And we've seen so many times in Formula One where a teammate will help, but the other teammate doesn't help, or the two teams won't help each other out. James Fowles, after the race in the post race interview, he was just ecstatic. They feel really great with the two great drivers that they have. They're putting Williams back on the spot. They're being competitive again. Double point finish for Williams and great teamwork between the two drivers. That has to feel like almost feel like a win for Williams. A great race weekend effort for them. That's my shining moment.
Yeah, that's a great moment because it seems like the Williams team has been struggling lately, and to get the great result for Alex Albon and Carlos Sainz today definitely worthy of a one shining moment. And my one shining moment is actually going to be NASCAR's return to Rockingham Speedway. It was such a spectacular race weekend yesterday. The Xfinity race, it was really nice to see. Sold out crowd. Everyone's so excited for the return of the Rock. It was just a real magical weekend. I know some of the teams and the drivers were worried heading into the weekend. I thought it was just going to be mostly a track position race. Like I saw the restart, that going to be difficult to pass. But all throughout the field, both in the truck and the Xfinity races, saw lots of great racing all throughout. And I think Rockingham Speedway definitely lived up to the hype, and I hope it will come back on the schedule in 2026 because it was just a great racing weekend all around. And a lot of people, thinking about memories of the past. It may not be the old Rockingham that you remember back in the day, but it's still Rockingham, and it really showed up and showed out. The track is really racing. Once it's repaved asphalt, gets a few years of age on it, I think the racing could be even better at this track because Rockingham, traditionally been known as a track for tire management. Now, well, actually, the two races we saw at, with Truck and Xfinity, it turned into a field mileage race, which is also equally as exciting as watching a tire management race. So I thought The Rock stepped up and delivered, and a great job to everyone who brought this track back to life because it was just an absolutely fantastic event. Also wanted to shout out one of the drivers from the race, Parker Retzloff, finishing second, qualifying on the front row and then getting that strong result as well. Just shows the great driver that he is and the potential that he has if he's able to get to a more competitive seat in the future. I thought Parker Retzloff's talent was truly on display this weekend at Rockingham Speedway.
Rockingham, very popular. And one of the big things is we're going to be talking about Rockingham tomorrow. Grid Encore will be on the air. Ben, Brandon, they'll be recapping the weekend at Rockingham. So encourage everyone to tune in for that. And of course, we'll do this all over again next weekend with Grid Live pre-race, the wrap-up show. Don't forget, Grid tonight, Wednesday. Kobe, Josh, Matt will be on the air. The latest Grid Endurance Performance Index after the World Endurance Championship race this weekend. And then Women in Motorsports and our NASCAR preview. And you can find all of it right here on YouTube. Subscribe, hit the bell icon, and across social media at Grid Network TV, across all the social media platforms. And again, a big thank you to all our investors, Colin, Michelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew for investing in us each and every month, helping us stay on the air. For Kobe, I'm Joe. Thank you for watching today's show. We'll see you next time.